appreciate this training, and your command and staff is going to really appreciate this training. The training that we have today really came down to us and was mandated by Congress to guard religious liberty, which is part of diversity and inclusion for the military. So the training that you're receiving today is part of a requirement that the Army has to properly familiarize every UMT with this material, and then by the end of June, you are required to train, brief, educate your command and staff on this very same material, and then until the end of this calendar year, your command has to make sure that every last soldier in your unit is trained on this material. And it's recommended in the direction that this be an annual training. So you might want to build that in to your training program, help your command and staff to be aware of it, and we encourage you to build your relationship with your JAG officer because they're a key part of the process. And when you do education for your command and staff, you don't want the JAG officer to be in opposition or to have a different understanding or a different tone on this. You want to be a team when you present this to your command and the rest of your staff. Today, we're going to be together all morning in this room. We're going to have a break at 10 o'clock, 10:00. That's going to be a 15-minute break. And then we will be concluding the morning in the back in the fellowship hall area for scenario-based discussion. So there's time today for you to talk with people who are familiar with these things and to lean on your technical chain. So this is the time where brigade chaplains, supervisory chaplains really shine. And I want to thank Chaplain Staten before we get started because he is an expert with the sound and light system. He makes a lot of things happen for us here at Northward Chapel. Let's give him a hand. Chaplain Staten, thanks for your expertise and your willingness to sacrifice your personal time and equipment to help us. Also, I want to thank our religious affairs specialists here at Lewis North that keep this facility tip-top shape. Always a great resource for training. And then this training is being recorded. It's being recorded by our new non-appropriated fund, CTOF supported media contractor, Julian. Julian is going to become more familiar to you. Right now, he is preparing to record this training. And this training is going to be uploaded to our JBLM Chap YouTube page. So you'll get an email about that. You can use this content for your own training, however you want to use it. And then we encourage you to print out and have at the ready the slides that are presented today and extracts that you might need to advise your command and staff and soldiers. You're going to see some examples of the good things to print out when we talk through the scenarios. There's hard copy printouts that are there for the discussion groups today. And with that said, I'm going to give it over to Chaplain Del Tufo, our senior chaplain, who will then give it over to Chaplain Nobles, then Sean.
Maybe I did. All right. How many chaplains, religious affairs specialists, DREs have joined us for the first times? This is 2021. This is your first time with us here at JBLM. Anybody? Show of hands. Well, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for having me. It's your birthday next week too, isn't it? That's what I hear. Oh yeah. So it's his birthday next week. Welcome. We're glad to have you here with us. Okay. Another one over here. Welcome. We're glad to have Chaplain Cho, right? I did your accessions interview too, didn't I? Yeah. See, it happened. So 06 interviews. See, you get to keep some people. I want to tell you that in processing this month, there's 745 new soldiers to JBLM that are going to be coming and joining our units. There's at least 5 chaplains in that group that are in processing. I met one of them last night. There's another one that has contacted me, and he signed in last night. He's getting his household goods today. I don't know how many religious affairs specialists are in that group, but just be mindful that with all these newcomers coming in, this is your chance, chaplains, religious affairs specialists, and DREs, to make relationships with these new soldiers coming in. We want to get them integrated into the community. We want them to feel involved, and we want to tell them that we have something for them, our faith-based communities that we offer. And speaking of that, I want to bring up Chaplain Mashoff, one of the leaders in creating faith-based communities. Where are you, Chaplain Mashoff? Come forward. So Chaplain Mashoff is getting a special award this morning. Your commander, Colonel Lomas, came. I want to invite you up too also for the special award given to Chaplain Mashoff. She's getting the Order of Martin of Tours. It's a chaplain branch award, and it's for all her contributions she's made, not over the years, but her leadership in Korea put her in for this, and it's just catching up with her now here at JBLM. I also want to say that we have a packet that if you see someone who is worthy of the Order of Martin of Tours, you can submit nominations for that through the senior chaplain chain up to the chief of chaplains for approval. So I want to say that you can do that. Chaplain Mashoff, as you know, she has gone the extra mile throughout her career. And in Korea, she did such things as the Logos Bible Project, the Bible software project I saw. Working in the chapel to build a strong chapel community, and especially during the hardest times hit during COVID, was able to keep and maintain those chapel communities going. And so with that, the leadership in 8th Army recommended her for the Martin of Tours. So, Chaplain Nobles, please publish the paper.
Please rise and attention to order. To all persons, wherever you may be, greetings on the recommendation of the Keeper of the Award and duly appointed Committee of Highly Esteemed and Proven Chaplains and RAS professionals, and likely candidate for the Order of Martin of Tours. Might all who hear or read this proclamation know that Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Carolyn K. Mashoff has been inspected and passed on by ourselves and our loyal staff, having been tried and found to embody the undying legacy of Martin of Tours. Be it further understood, by virtue of authority vested in the Chief of Chaplains, I confer upon this individual the Order of Martin of Tours, together with all honors, rights, and privileges pertaining thereto, in recognition of the fulfillment of all requirements. Given under my hand this day, the 24th day of September 2020, signed, Thomas L. Solja, Chaplain Major General, U.S. Army, Chief of Chaplains. Woo!
All right, Chaplain State, you can be my slide flipper back there. Okay. So this morning we're going to talk all about religious accommodations, and we're going to talk all about your role as a chaplain in advising commanders in this area. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, so every month I get the opportunity to go teach at the company commander and first sergeant course, which are all your brand new company commanders and first sergeants who are going to be taking over. And these are the slides that I give them. Why am I showing you these this morning? We're going to go through them real quick. I'm not going to take as much time as I do in the company commander course, because I want you to see what I'm presenting to them, because they're going to come back to you now with all these deep questions about what I talked about, because my briefing of 30 minutes that I get with them is only one of about 50 briefings on everything from land management to the UPL program to SHARP and EO and behavioral health. So my portion is just one little tiny portion in there, and that's okay. I'll send the slides out. I'll send you the slides. Okay, you don't have to. They're 27 megabytes, so I'll hang them on our SharePoint page. You can find out where our SharePoint page is and go down. I want you to see them because they, at some point, one of these questions is going to come up, and they're going to be like, I know that the Corps chaplain talked about that, and I don't remember everything that the Corps chaplain said, but I'm going to go ask my battalion chaplain, and they're going to know all the answers. That's why we're doing this training today, to give you the answers so that when you're asked, you don't have to say, well, Captain, I've heard that, but I don't really know. Okay? Religious affairs specialists. You're a specialist in something, right? Religious affairs. So you need to know this information also, because some first sergeant who sat in my class is going to come up to you and be like, hey, Sergeant Carrico, I got a question. This soldier says he just converted to Norse paganism last week, and he watched the movie Thor, and Chris Hemsworth, he looked real good in that beard, and he wants one of those. Is that a thing? And you're going to be like, First Sergeant, I don't know, right? So that's why we're here today, to help you answer those kind of questions, right? So here's my first slide again, the Chapel Corps capabilities. Perform, provide religious support, and advise, and we protect free exercise of religion for all. Notice up there, it doesn't say that we are the suicide prevention officer. It doesn't say that we're the unit PAO. It doesn't say that we're the SHARP counselor. It doesn't say that we're the NARC for everything that's going on in the unit, or the IG. It doesn't say all that in there. It says that we advise the commander on morals and morale, and we provide for free exercise of religion. Okay? Next slide. Here's the big takeaways of what chaplains really do. If you can figure out this list, and you can do everything on this list, you will succeed in the Chaplain Corps. Does any of that look out of the ordinary? All right, this is what we do. I mean, this is the bread and butter. If you can figure all this out, this is why we run our CPRT classes. Basically, we hit all these things in there. Okay, some of you, I've heard some of the discussions. I already did CPRT at my last unit. Do I have to do it again? I'm like, I don't know. All our CPRT is the top 10 things that chaplains need to know. Okay, so if you're a brigade chaplain out there and you say, I have these battalion chaplains, and some of these things in the top 10 things, I think that my battalion chaplains need to know. You should send your chaplains to CPRT, because it's like, they need to know these things. Okay, next slide. So here's the slide that you probably were all wondering about. I asked my G1 at the Corps to pull the religious diversity of JBLM. So this was, do I have the date on here when I pulled this? 1 October, the new fiscal year. I pulled this 1 October. And you can see here, I didn't know that we had 142 Islamic soldiers at JBLM. Do all of them know about the Islamic prayer time on Friday afternoons? I don't know. Who's supposed to tell them that? Are we just supposed to put it on a flyer? Or are we supposed to help them also to know where these things are? This is part of providing religious support. Okay. Buddhist. Did you know there's 209 registered Buddhist soldiers in the Army system here at JBLM? 209. Do you know who all 209 of them are? I don't either. I don't either. But I'm sure that Chaplain Cunn, in your unit, you may have one. Does that soldier in your unit know where the Buddhist chaplain is and where that happens at? I don't know. Yeah, see, I don't know. These are questions that we ask. This is part of providing religious support. It's helping soldiers to practice their religious beliefs, whether they're in the garrison area, in the unit area, in the field, or on deployment. It's all tied together. All ministries, unit ministry. Okay, now you're asking about these smaller density. Now go to the next slide. I don't want you to confuse this with a big portion. This is the small, lower density religious preferences. Okay, 343 atheists, 13 Sikh soldiers, 11 Wiccans. I know we have an active Wiccan group. We have 11 registered. And this is from the Army system. 48 pagans. So you can see some of the other different lower density religious groups out there. All to say that they are in your units. Know who they are. Okay, next slide. Okay, so religious accommodations from AR 600-20 5-6. We make comments based on the sincerity. So go, next slide. Okay, so I'm giving you the quick one. Question 1. My religion says I can have a beard. Can I have a beard? Go ahead, next. Here's our Jewish soldiers, or some of our Jewish chaplains that are out there. They have beards. I put on there, oh, by the way, our holy day's coming up, am I allowed to attend? You know, because that's always a question that comes up. Next slide. Question 1B. I'm a Sikh. I grew up a Sikh. My religion says I can have a beard and wear a turban. Can I wear a beard and have a turban? That looks like a 201st on my touch, if I didn't know any better. Okay, next slide. 1C. I converted to Norse pagan last month, and they wear beards. Can I have a beard? Next slide. All right, now we move on to question number 2. I practice Islam. Part of my beliefs say I want to be modest and not show my hair. Can I wear a hijab in uniform? There you go. Next slide. Question 3. I practice Islam. I'm supposed to pray 5 times a day. Can I take an hour to go pray? Next slide. What if they want to do it 5 times a day, though? And they want to miss all kinds of other things to do that. That's what we're going to talk about today. All right, next slide. 3B, I practice Buddhism. Can I go take an hour to pray? You recognize any of these people? I hope so. Next slide. Question number 4. I practice Native American religions, and we're going to go to a sweat lodge and smoke peyote. Can I attend this once-a-year ritual? Next slide. What about food? Can I have separate rations or special meals when I go to the field? Perhaps you've seen these. Perhaps you've been involved in the ordering process or carried them around. Okay. Next slide. Okay, that's all I got for you this morning. We're going to change over computers, and I'm going to turn you over to the experts. But I just want you to know that that's what I talk to your commanders and first sergeants about. They're just get a little taste, and they're going to go back and ask you for what you're going to learn the next 2 hours of being with us in chapter.
How long do you talk to this?
I get a half an hour, and that is only a portion of what I talk about. The rest of the time I talk about things like strong bonds. Perhaps you've heard of that. I talk about things of the command-sponsored chaplain-led program. That is not the chaplain's program, it's the commander's program. I talk about those kind of things. I talk about 100% confidentiality, because really that's our bread and butter, is that we have 100% confidentiality, and we walk with service members. I say service members because we're a joint base. We walk with service members through all phases of their life. Even when they get in trouble, even when they're facing felony charges, we are 100% confidential counselors to them and walk with them through whatever they're going through in life. So those are the kind of things I talk about with the commanders and the first sergeants, and that's what they're expecting from you also. And with that, I will turn you over to Chaplain Nobles. I'll turn you over, son.
He put me on the spot again, Chaplain Nobles. So I just want to say, I hope y'all had a great holiday. Happy New Year to everyone. I'm glad everybody made it back safely. Remember that you are the subject matter expert when it comes to religious accommodation. Commanders are going to be coming to you. So get all you can out of this training, add notes. Well, we'll make sure that y'all get all the packet, all the documents and stuff that comes with this training. And if you have questions, please ask your questions, okay? And again, thank you everyone for attending this training, okay?
Awesome, Sir Major. Well, hello team. Good morning. How are you doing? All right, that is low energy. How are you doing? All right, you better be excited, because you're going to be teaching this, every single one of you, down to the soldier level. And if you're not excited about this topic, you need to get some energy, right? Because this topic means a lot to your soldiers. Raise your hand if you've seen one of these packets go through and personally impact a soldier's life for the good. All right. I'll tell you about Sergeant Gill, who's a Sikh. All right, Sergeant Gill was one of my intel soldiers in 1-2 Stryker Brigade. Sergeant Gill is an amazing human being. He was one of the first Sikhs on active duty. And Chaplain Colonel Gordon Grosclose, who was in the Chief of Chaplain's office, step by step walked with Sergeant Gill, who was then Mr. Gill, right, to come on to active duty. As a Sikh, to be able to be on active duty with his beard and turban. And it was like Chaplain Gordon Grosclose gave this man his entire, wealth. That's how much this packet and him being on active duty meant to Sergeant Gill. He was the biggest friend of Chaplain Nobles you could ever find, right? He was behind us 100%, and we were like part of his own clan. I learned from him that Sikhs are a warrior faith, right? I learned that being a fighter was so important to him as a Sikh. And when he served as a soldier, he was able to live out his Sikh faith. And it's just one story. But you need to take this training and do what my boss did and come up with colorful slides and a way to give this training that can make sense to your leaders and soldiers. So we'll be giving examples. Chaplain Cisco has already trained at our First Corps team on this. He did it last month. So that's one example we can send out. But you take this training, cater it to your unit, to your soldiers, and teach it with passion because it's very, very important. All right, it's about you. If you don't care about this, leaders will not care about this. Do you understand? I need you to care about this because it's very important. All right. At 3:46 this morning, I think it was, Chaplain Barry Black got up in front of the Senate and offered a prayer. I don't know if you've heard of Chaplain Barry Black, but he is our Senate chaplain. And I think one of the coolest things about Chaplain Barry Black is he hasn't changed. He was a Navy chaplain. He was where you are. And the way he does ministry has not changed. I visited Chaplain Black in his office in the Senate. And you know what that man does? He does Bible study in the Senate chambers. He does prayer group with those in Congress in the Senate. He has others helping him. And he counsels those in the Congress. And you know who led the Senate and led the nation this morning at 3:46 a.m.? It was a chaplain. Chaplain Barry Black that got up and prayed his heart out for our nation. He spoke, I believe, truth and love to our nation at a very critical time, and that's what you do, chaplain, in your unit. You are the one who stands up, speaks truth and love at the friction point. I don't know if in your lifetime you've ever seen a friction point in our nation like we had yesterday. But he spoke up, and he was the pastor to the nation at that point. Listen to his prayer. Learn from his prayer. I have Peter Marshall's prayers, book of prayers, when he was Senate chaplain. I read those prayers, and that helps shape my prayers. Read history, stay in touch, and listen to Chaplain Black's prayer. And I hope you were encouraged as you do that, as I was. All right, religious accommodation training. Are we up on the slide yet, Chaplain State? So, coming from the Chief of Chaplain's office, we have task condition standards. That's where we start out. TLOs and ELOs, right? Bottom line is you need to understand AR 600-20, Chaplain Grossrock will be going through that with us today. Chaplain Rusak will lead us through some practical exercises to help us understand. There's Title 42, Title 10, our federal code that underlies this. Be in touch with these documents. So let's go next slide. Next slide. All right, here's your references. Key one, you'll see third from the bottom, AR 600-20. That's where the primary focus will be. All right, so what does this mean to you? Our task at Corps and Garrison is to have all of you trained no later than the 30th of January. So that's what we're doing today. So there's only about half of our UMTs here today. That's why we're taping this. The others will watch on video, and you'll tell us when your people are trained. All right, then you train your leaders, commanders and staff. Let's go next slide. Next slide. All right. Okay, you train commanders and staff no later than 30 June. All right, so that's your timeline for training then. This has come down at a Chief of Chaplain order, also USERPAC order, and then we will publish an order as well. And then you train your soldiers from after 30 June until the end of the year. All right, and then you're sending all that data back to us. All right, that's the piece I had to cover on this. Any questions of me? All right, Chaplain Schaffner follows me, sir.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy New Year, if I have not seen you or said that to you yet. I have the little bit of a piece kind of before the piece. As we were preparing for this training, one of the comments I made, and young chaplains, this is a learning point. If you make a comment, guess what you get stuck doing? I made a comment that oftentimes for us in our in this area, we tend to want to jump right away to the technical parts of the how do you do a religious accommodation packet, what are the rights and lefts, what are the different scenarios. But this morning we wanted to stop, and I was grateful that in the Chiefs packet, they organized this in a way where we take a step back and talk about the things that underpin religious accommodation. And so you'll notice that the title of the training is Religious Liberty and Religious Accommodation. Because all of these accommodations are based on liberties, rights, and freedoms that we are guaranteed in the Constitution and through our legal system, through our regulations. So, I thought it was only appropriate. I thought it was great the way they organized the slide deck so that we could start off with that portion of it and then move into the actual details of how you help a soldier get an accommodation for a beard. So, next slide. So, the interesting thing, or where we want to start with, is the Constitution. How many have ever come to a chaplain anniversary picnic? What was the founding of the Chaplain Corps? When was the founding of the Chaplain Corps? I should have brought candy to throw out to people. What? July of 1775. All right, here's a harder question. When was the Constitution signed? 1789. So the Chaplain Corps existed for 14 years prior to the Constitution being signed, right? So we actually have a history that goes back even before the Constitution. But our right and privilege to be a chaplain corps today and the rights and privileges of the soldiers that we take care of is rooted in the Constitution, right? So the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, what was the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights? Where does religious liberty fall? 14th Amendment? 10th Amendment? 9th Amendment? Where does religious liberty get talked about? The First Amendment, right? And you see a pattern here. in the First Amendment, there are 4 major freedoms that we enjoy. Anybody want to help me name those 4 freedoms? Freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. Freedom of the press. Freedom of assembly. Okay, freedom of assembly, press, speech, religion. Which one of those 4 main freedoms is number 1? So what do you think the founding fathers were trying to say to us when they put in the First Amendment, the first freedom was religious liberty? This was front and center for them when they wrote the Constitution, when they wrote the Bill of Rights. They were thinking about protecting our religious liberty. And so they put it, number 1, in number 1. It is the First Amendment. It is the first freedom mentioned in the First Amendment. And you notice that it's divided into 2 parts, right? It's there at the top of the screen. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of your religion or the free exercise thereof. 2 clauses, the Establishment Clause, the Free Exercise Clause. Most of the time for us, we are dealing with the second clause. We are dealing with the Free Exercise Clause. So when we talk about accommodating somebody, we are talking about the second clause of allowing them, encouraging them, enabling them to be able to practice whose religion? Say it again, say it loud. Their religion. Here's an interesting point. If we were requiring them to practice our religion, then what would we be doing? We would be violating clause number 1, because we would then be establishing a religion. And so the clause right there just told us, we shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. So these are all real basic things. I know most of this is just a reminder for you that you already know this. That these are the kind of basic things I think it's important for us to have down pat, right? I always love, how many are football people? I always love that old thing, Vince Lombardi, great football coach. He would start every year, he would start the first practice of every year by holding up the pigskin and saying, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Can't get more basic than that, right? This for us is about blocking and tackling. This is a football. We're not establishing a religion, but we are protecting everybody's free exercise of their own religion. So, what I want you to take away from this slide, if you don't get anything else, is that freedom of religion, free exercise, is a right, not a privilege. It is a right, not a privilege. That puts it in a completely different category. So when your commander is looking at things, when you are looking at things, you are not looking at a privilege. What would be an example of a privilege in the military? What are some privileges you have?
Permissive TDY.
What?
Permissive TDY.
Permissive TDY. That's a privilege. You're not required to get that. What else? Anybody go to the PX? Anybody shop at the commissary? Get those great discounts that we get at the commissary? Those are privileges. Those are not rights. They're not the same thing. The ability to go to the movie theater on post, is that a right or a privilege? It's a privilege. It's not a right. Religious liberty is a right. Okay? So, if it is a right, then whose responsibility is it to support that right or to guarantee that right? Next slide. And I will warn you that this next slide is a slide that I inserted. This is not in your Chief Chaplain's packet. This is a slide that I inserted because I thought this was an important piece to hit on. Whose responsibility in the unit is it to guarantee the free exercise of religion?
The commander.
It's your commander's responsibility, right? Gave you 3 references from 3 totally different sources there. Joint Pub, Army Pub, and DoD policy, right? And every last one of them, if you read down through it, you will hear a similar theme. Religious affairs are the commander's responsibility and consist of the combination of religious support and religious advisement. Religious support, RS advises or addresses the Joint Commander's responsibility to support the free exercise of religion. Whose responsibility? The Joint Commander's responsibility for free exercise of religion. Look at the second one. Religious support mission of the Chaplain Corps is to assist commanders in the responsibility to provide for the free exercise of religion. In the DoD policy, it is DoD policy that the chaplaincy of the military departments are established to advise and assist commanders in the discharge of their responsibility, not the chaplain's responsibility, the commander's responsibility to provide for the free exercise of religion. So what this policy, and this is all throughout our regulation, it's all throughout our policy, it's all throughout our legal documents, right? It's the commander's responsibility. So who's the primary officer to help the commander implement or live up to that requirement that he's been given by UCMJ, by the regulation, by DoD policy? Whose job is it to help him implement that? You're his primary staff officer in this arena. So you need to be the one who is the true north on this subject. So if a commander comes to you and says, hey chaplain, is this a free exercise? Is this a free exercise issue? Is this accommodation the right thing to do? Hey chaplain, how are we doing with our religious program in our unit? Now we hear this one a lot lately. Are we providing for everybody? Are we providing for everybody in our formation? Why is he asking you that? Because it's his responsibility to guarantee the free exercise for everybody in that formation, and you're there to help him. You saw the little chart that Chaplain Del Tufo put up there. That's an excellent chart. I would encourage every one of you to get that pie chart. I have that pie chart on my desktop in my office, right? Those statistics are very important when you're talking to your commander, right? I don't know if you noticed in that pie chart earlier, but well, let me approach it a different way. How many of you have heard about the rise of what they call the nuns? Not nuns like Catholic nuns, nuns. Like those who say no religious preference. How many of you have read articles about that? A lot of people are talking about the rise of the nuns. But if you remember back to the chart, I know you didn't have a long time to look at it, that Chaplain Del Tufo threw up there. What percentage of the folks on JBLM consider themselves part of the nuns? What?
20%.
Guess. Somebody threw me a guess. Throw me a number.
23%.
How many?
23%.
23%. That's almost exactly right. Now here's an interesting thing, that how statistics can sometimes help you or hurt you. Because that is the fastest growing category, that is the category that has been getting talked about the most. You will also get a lot of talk and a lot of dialogue about the small pie chart that Chaplain Del Tufo threw up there second, that talks about all of the smaller religions, because we have a principle of making sure that the majority takes care of the minority. Amen? We're all in this together, right? So, if you focus on those two pieces, the rise of the nuns and taking care of the minority soldiers, which is important, minority religious soldiers, which is very important. You're not going to ignore the nuns. You're not going to ignore the smaller faith groups, right? But what have we left out here? If you go back to that chart, you'll notice that 69% of the soldiers in the army have something on their dog tags that declares them as a Christian. If you add in the Western religions, Muslim and Jewish, you go up to well over 70%. So what is Chaplain Schaffner saying to you? You have to look at those statistics from a point of view of advising your commander that, yes, sir, it is very important for you to remember to take care of these smaller faith groups. Yes, sir, it is very important for us not to inflict religion upon the people who don't want to be religious, the nuns. But sir, 7 out of 10 soldiers standing in your formation self-identified on their dog tags as some type of Christian Western religious person. You don't want to lose. You want to give your commander good information. Don't let the truth of those statistics get lost in the cacophony that is often comes from focusing on one thing. Does that make sense? You want to make sure that you are looking at the whole thing, that everybody on that pie chart is getting represented. That's what free exercise means. Free exercise means that everybody on that pie chart is getting a chance to function in their religious belief the way they want to. Okay? All right. So it's the commander's responsibility. Next slide. I like this slide, and I moved this slide earlier in the deck because I wanted to focus on your responsibility, the commander's responsibility, the fact that it's a right. But this is from AR 600-20. AR 600-20 is which regulation? So this is not the Chaplain Corps regulation. This is not 165-1. This is Army Command Policy, right? And notice what that first line says. The Army places a little bit of value, some value. The Army does religious freedom when it can. Is that what it says? What's it say? It says that the Army places high value on the rights of soldiers to observe the tenets of their respective religion. Here's an important statement, or to observe no religion at all. The Army places high value on it. Now, I'm getting old, and retirement is right around the door for me. Have any of you ever been in a unit where you experienced, where you would have said that there wasn't a high value placed on religion? Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have you raise your hand. I'll raise my hand. Yeah, nobody's ever been to a unit where you came to the first staff meeting and they said, there's no chair for the chaplain. And chaplain, you can sit over there in the corner. This never happened to anybody but me. Where everybody has a deck, everybody has a slide deck, except for you. Can I tell you, I wish I had $1 for every time I've gone to the S3 and said, hey, just wondering, why does everybody else have a slide except for me? Right? And if I'd have been smarter when I was a captain, I'd have kept this policy in my back pocket and I'd have whipped it out and said, the Army places high value on the rights of a soldier's religious, and I'm here to protect that. So I ought to be number 1 in the slide deck. Say amen. You should say amen right there. Amen. Should be number 1 in the slide deck because the Army places high value on this. Don't let that get away from you. We are a highly valued part. The Army highly values protecting people's religious rights. Okay? Next slide. One of the laws that has come in relatively recently has been, and hasn't really kind of, in my opinion, folks haven't quite grabbed onto it yet at the level that they need to understand it, is what we call RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act is a huge protection for folks' religious rights. And the Religious Freedom Restoration Act says the government may substantially burden a person's exercise of religion only, keyword, only if it demonstrates that application of the burden to the person is in the furtherance of a compelling government interest and is the least restrictive means of furthering the compelling government interest. So what does all that mean? What are the key takeaways there? When can the military, when can the government impinge upon your religious freedoms? When can they do that?
When it's a compelling governmental interest.
So when it is a compelling government interest, compelling, key word, what would constitute a compelling government interest? It would have to be something that is critical to something that would cause failure to a unit, something that would cause a national defense crisis. This is a very high bar, is what you need to hear here. The Religious Freedom Reformation Act says that there are occasions where the military may have your religious freedom postponed or held off for a moment, but it can only do that if it is a compelling government interest, and the method that the government uses is the least restrictive of your religious rights. Least restrictive. That means, so, do you hear the tone of the language here? Who is the impetus on in the Religious Freedom Reformation Act? The right belongs to the person, and the ability to curtail that right, the responsibility to prove that there's a compelling interest lies with the government, not with the soldier. The soldier shouldn't be having to defend himself. The soldier should be being able to say, hey, I have this right. Army highly values it. It goes all the way back to our constitutional foundation. If you are going to restrict my right, you need to show, the government needs to show that that is compelling. That it is compelling and that you're using the least restrictive method or means for me to not have my religious freedom for a period of time. Does that make sense? So the Religious Freedom Reformation Act has a lot of layers to it. I would encourage you, when you have some time, to read through more of it. It is becoming the basis for many of the cases across the country that you see that are coming through the courts. They're coming through the courts based on this law, the Religious Freedom Reformation Act. Next slide. So, the Religious Freedom Reformation Act is the religious liberty standard. So it has become the new standard for how we are going to adjudicate and look at different types of situations that arise in which the government may need to, want to, or be looking at, or your commander may be looking at, suspending someone's religious liberty or not being able to accommodate their religious liberty. It is a very high test. All right, next slide. DoD component will accommodate individual expression of sincerely held beliefs. Interesting language there. What is a sincerely held belief? Who's going to help the commander decide whether something is a sincerely held religious belief? How do you assess sincerity?
Talk to the service member that's coming to the chaplain. They'll come to the chaplain essentially does what they call an interview. They see how sincere that service member actually is, and then they're actually practicing more of a kind of a way to control your.
So when you're approaching this soldier, and your commander's depending on you to help him determine the sincerity of that soldier, it is critical. It's one of the few footstop moments for Chaplain Schaffner here. It is critical that you, as the chaplain, deal with each individual on the individual merits of their individual case. I know that you are wonderful, highly trained, professional religious leaders, but we are also human beings. Don't fall into the trap of having in your mind that person is only trying to do that to get that. If that's the thought that is in your mind when that person walks in for your interview, you have already kind of set up a bias and a hurdle for that person to overcome. I know that that is one of the first things that other people you talk to are going to say. Say amen. Amen? Other people who hear about somebody trying to get a religious accommodation, one of the first things you are going to hear from somebody in your organization is, oh, Schmedlap's just doing that to get separate rats. Schmedlap's just doing that because he don't like the regular MREs. Schmedlap's just doing that because he wants a beard. You cannot allow yourself as a professional to fall into that trap. When Schmedlap comes into your office, you have to give him every benefit of every doubt, and you have to deal with it on an individual basis. You have to hear his story. Because there might be 10 guys who are trying to do it just to get whatever. That's not your duty. Your duty is to look Schmedlap in the eye and help the commander determine whether Schmedlap is sincere. Not a whole group of people. Schmedlap. Very important that we kind of maintain that professionalism in our interviewing of soldiers, and then in our research. Oftentimes, commanders will ask you, is this a natural practice within this religious group? Yes, it is. No, it's not. Even if it's no, it's not, it's still not completely a barrier to that person getting an accommodation. But that's what commanders are looking for. When we are talking about a sincerely held belief, sincerity is not a standardized thing. There is some level of subjectivity that comes with determining whether someone is sincere or not. Your job is to help the commander make that decision, to help him work through whether this person is sincere or not. How many of you have ever heard a commander say, Chaplain, if I do it for this one, finish the sentence for me. it's going to be like a floodgate. I'm going to have bearded soldiers all over the place. Right? Is that a legitimate barrier to giving a soldier an accommodation? Because religious freedom is an individual right, the commander must deal with each case individually. It's individual. So that argument that I'm going to have to do this for 50 other people if I do it for this guy is not on its own a valid argument. If the commander could come back at some point and say, if I have 50 soldiers, it's going to compromise the function of my unit, he could try that. I'm not sure that even that would reach the level of compelling government interest, but that would be something different. The single soldier not wanting to do it for this one because it's going to cause a cascade effect is not a valid argument under RFRA. RFRA is an individual right, and it is about determining the sincerity of each individual person's accommodation. Okay, next slide. I can see the clock on the wall. I'm going to go quicker. You have all these slides. You can read them yourself. I would encourage you to go back and work your way through them. And Chaplain Noble's already pointed this out. Chaplain Del Tufo pointed it out earlier. Notice how many of these slides that we're looking at are not are Army regulations like command policy. These are 600 series regulations. Again, the reason for that is religious freedom and religious liberty, religious accommodation is a command issue. And you're there to help the commander with it, right? Okay? So the Army will provide fair treatment. The Army will provide fair treatment. Okay? What does that mean? What's the Army? What's fair treatment? Again, how do you define the word fair? You're going to have to help the commander, remind people on your team that religion is one of those, I think there's 7 categories that EO is supposed to watch out for, right? Equal opportunity includes religion. And making decisions and determinations based on somebody's religion is not appropriate, right? The interesting line that I caught out of this one is, look at the second bullet. Soldiers will not be assessed, classified, trained, assigned, promoted, or otherwise managed on the basis of religion. It's an interesting one. So, it's the season of Ramadan is coming up. And I have 15 Muslim soldiers in my infantry battalion. So they're all going to need or want, they've all asked if they could, they're going to be fasting during the day. And so, assigning them to heavy labor in the hot sun during those hours of the day, that might be problematic, right? Now, the natural tendency in battalions, brigades, and divisions is to defer to who? When there is an issue, who do commanders often defer to? Legal. They want a legal opinion. Don't be afraid of your JAG office. You should be working with your JAG office. But brethren, sisterin, we are the religious support officers for the unit. If it has to do with religion, you are the expert. You are the subject matter expert. Now you need to work with your JAG officer. You need to understand the legal piece of it, but you are the commander's religious support officer. So you've got to embrace this. You've got to take this on. Don't get into the habit of just letting it slide to the JAG office, right? That's not what you're being paid to do. You get paid the big bucks to step up and help deal with these kind of issues. remember the RFRA standards. Those are important, right? Compelling interest. Compelling interest, least restrictive means. You got to help your commander understand that you can't deny people their religious liberties unless it is absolutely compelling, and compelling is a very high standard. Chaplains are accountable to their endorsing religious groups. One of the things that we've seen lately that I think I want to remind you is that chaplains and religious affairs specialists have rights too. You have rights under the RFRA, just like any other soldier, right? So, chaplains have accountability to their endorsing religious groups in matters pertaining to maintaining their credentials. If a chaplain jeopardizes their religious credentials, it could force them to be separated from the service. No member of the armed forces may require a chaplain to perform duties that are contrary to the conscience, moral principles, or religious beliefs of the chaplain. Okay? So just like you're there defending everybody else's rights, you have rights too. Just because you're the religious support officer for the unit doesn't mean that the command can turn around and say, well, I want you, you used to drive me crazy. How many of you are old enough to remember the movie MASH, the show MASH, right? Father Mulcahy, right? For years and years, everybody thought that's what an Army chaplain was, Father Mulcahy. And although I love Father Mulcahy, love the character, it used to drive me nuts that on a couple of the episodes, Father Mulcahy is coming out of the tent after doing a Jewish service. Father Mulcahy, if you don't remember the show, Father Mulcahy is a Catholic priest, right? Well, there's no way on God's green earth that any Catholic priest is going to do a Jewish service. Nor would you want your Jewish soldiers going to a service led by a Catholic priest to do a Jewish service. Amen? It was a very poor portrayal of how chaplains function in the Army, right? We are not the generic religious person that does all of this. We have our own faith representation. And you've got rights. You have rights under RFRA just like the soldiers do, okay? Again, you are there to advise the commander to help to carry out his responsibility to protect the free exercise. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Do we have time for questions or no? Questions? I just remembered I'm the 06. Hey, questions? Anybody have any questions? No questions. I just covered the Constitution, RFRA. No questions? Yes, sir.
Right, so if there's a chaplain, I have a Muslim, they want to do religious accommodation for beer, and say my commander doesn't want, yes, I have to do my letter, I have to engage sincerely, but my commander's adding to that folder wants to have the imam also. So I'm putting a substantial burden on that soldier that's requiring more of the guidance.
I don't know that I'm going to give you my opinion. That I don't know that I'm right here, but I'm going to give you my opinion. To me, that doesn't sound like a substantial burden. If his imam is willing to do it, his packet cannot be held up because it doesn't have a letter from the imam. His packet can be processed and sent forward with just his letter and your interview. So he doesn't have to have the letter from the imam. But if he can get it, it helps his letter. I've had multiple packets where I've either helped the person get somebody in their denomination to endorse that, but I don't believe you can stop the packet. The packet can't be stopped by the extra thing. Jump in.
I'm going to jump in because I dealt with this, and this was in the context of the Black Israelites. It's a group out there, and they wear beards also, and they are so. I said to the soldier, when did you convert to this religion? Because it says in your military record that you're Southern Baptist. And they're like, oh, it's been like 3 or 4 years now. I go, first of all, go get your military records updated to reflect what religious group you're part of, number one. Second, get a letter from your religious group saying that you are for all intents and purposes, a card-carrying member of that religious group, and that this is a requirement of that religious group. Because then you run into this whole personal piety clause and all that other stuff that the Army and DOD is sorting out right now. But that is not a burden on the soldier if they're part of that religious group, to get a letter from whatever religious group they're part of that says that they are a bona fide member of that group, and that's one of the requirements. Yeah.
Going back to what Chapel was saying, we have jagged in the room here so legally, the only requirement is that we have our letter, the soldier, again, they don't have to have their letter, that's just adds to the case, but we need to have our letter. Really, that is the level of burden.
And what is your letter address?
My letter address is sincerity.
The sincerity, exactly.
Correct. So anything beyond that, the soldier doesn't necessarily need that courage to move forward. That's what I heard.
So in my letter, I could put in, the soldier states that they're this religion. The soldier cannot produce a document saying that they are part of this group, that the imam doesn't know who they are, and that they have not changed their personnel record to reflect this because they're afraid that their mother will get mad at them if they take Southern Baptist off of their religious group. And I can put that in my letter because it's not confidential, and I can say based on this if he was sincere about it, he would change these things.
Sir, using your example, I'm not going
Okay.
Your generic soldier,
Right.
Soldier, right? Minimally, for that pack to go forward, 4187.
Right.
Right. A commander's memorandum.
Right.
Right. My memorandum teaching sincerity.
Okay.
And that's it.
Okay.
Right? That is it. Anything beyond that, right? Soldier letter or a letter from their specific, religious faith leader who knows them. That is addition to, right?
I don't know. We're going to get to what's in all the packets. All I know is that, they can come back. All the ones that come up through Corps all come over to me. The first thing that I look at is which chaplain did their interview. And there are certain chaplains that do interviews that I'm like, oh, that chaplain did the interview. It's good to go. And there's other ones that I'm like, let me look into this a little further. I'm telling you, that's what happens because after it leaves my desk, it goes to the CG. And so I just say that those things like that, without the substantiating documents, will get filtered out at the lower levels and never make it past battalion and brigade commanders.
And you can find the substantiating documentation. Just so I can be clear here. Besides the 4187, commander memo, chaplain memo, is there another substantiating document?
Anything you can put in there to help the cause is good.
Yeah, that's the subject of the whole rest of the training today. So I'm eating up your break time here, so I'm going to let you go to break. But yes, the scenarios we're going to do this afternoon are all going to address that. But the short answer is yes, you're right. Those minimum documents are all that's required. Okay, if he can produce those other documents, great. They help his case, and so if he can, he should. But again, when we talk about advising the command, everybody gets that kind of mixed up. When we talk about, listen to what I just said. We advise the what?
Commander.
Command, not the commander. You are an advisor to your entire command. So at that moment, you are an advisor to that soldier, right? Soldier, you don't have to have this, but I would advise you if you can to get this, right? You don't have to have it, but I would advise you. You should be advising your commander. Sir, I would advise you not to unduly burden soldiers with more than, if this soldier can't produce it, sir, we still need to put this packet forward because you're advising the command. You advise everybody in the command. Starts with the commander, but you advise everybody, okay? You are the religious support advisor for everybody, all right?
Okay, everybody, we have Chaplain Osborne here, our family life chaplain. We want to encourage you to seize every opportunity that's presented to you for opportunity training. And he's going to give us a little bit of information about the opportunity training for chaplains, focused on first-term chaplains and battalion chaplains, the Family Life Introductory course.
Thank you, Chaplain Grossreich. I'm Brian Osborne, Family Life Chaplain. And if you're new to Fort, or JBLM, I'm so used to saying forts these days, but welcome, and I'm your Family Life Chaplain. So if you have any concerns or questions or needs related to counseling, I'm here to support you. And so first-term chaplains and those who are part of the Brown Bag Lunch community, we're meeting in room 105 after this at 11:30, okay? And we're going to be talking for about an hour and a half. And so that's one thing that many people will be involved with today. The second thing is this. If you have not attended a Family Life Intro course, how many of you have done the Family Life Intro course before? Raise your hands high. I got to see those hands. I see a few hands, all right? We should see a whole lot more hands. And here's the deal. In March 15th through the 26th, for 2 weeks, JBLM will have its, I'm guessing its first ever, maybe not, I could be wrong about that. I don't know where the history annals are for that, but we're going to call it the first ever, at least in recent memory, the first ever Family Life Intro course. And so if you are interested in learning more about family life and increasing your counseling knowledge and skills, this will be a great opportunity for you to not have to go TDY anywhere, so you can stay home, chill out with your family, but also during the duty day, get some good knowledge and good information and develop your approach and technique in counseling. So that is going to be here at JBLM, the 15th through the 26th, and you just coordinate care with your brigade or whoever is here to support you in terms of providing care and coverage for your unit. But let your command know and have your battalion commander sign the form that is required, the application, and that will let them know that you are going to be out of their network for at least 2 weeks, okay? And so if you need all that information is out there on the, I can't remember what the portal's called, is it the RSO portal? It also has been sent out through First Corps, so be sure to check, and if you need that information sent directly to you, just go direct with me. You'll find me at roger.b.osborne2.mil. Okay, so just look up roger.b.osborne2.mil and reach out to me. I'll send you the forms that you need to get signed up. It's real easy, but you just need to let your command know what's going on. Any questions about the Family Life Intro course? Yes? So right now we have 9 registered, and so this is ATAR's registration, so this goes on your ORB, on your military course section of your ORB. So right now we have 9, and we're looking to fill at least 20, that's the goal, but we can take as many as 25, okay? So again, this is a great opportunity for you not to have to go TDY, not to spend any more time away from your families, and get some training that will be good for you and your development, and also it's really good to have that on your military school's record as well. Okay, any other questions besides that? Yes?
Will there be follow-up opportunities if we can't take this course?
Follow-up opportunities if you can't take this course. There are opportunities at Fort Bliss and at Fort Bragg and Fort Hood. I can connect you to those. Right now, I believe my intent as Family Life Chaplain, I'm sure the First Corps chaplain and staff would agree, is that we'll make another iteration available, whether it be at this time or in March of 22 or maybe earlier than that, okay? So, but there are other opportunities. Other questions? Anyone else?
So you're telling me I can go to this course and don't have to go TDY to it, I can take it right here and it counts on my ACORs, it counts on my military record?
Absolutely, sir, you can, and it's...
It'll help make me a better counselor?
It'll help make you a better counselor. It'll develop your knowledge and your skills and give you an insight into family life and what it's about. But also, it will. The goal is, one of our competencies, core competencies as chaplains, is counseling. We've got to be good counselors. And so, if you're, as you move through the chaplain corps, and if you're a young chaplain and you become a, deputy division chaplain, and someone calls you from the staff and says, "Hey, chaplain, I need to talk to you about my marriage. It's falling apart." And if you've been that type of chaplain that I was as a battalion chaplain that did a lot of referrals and didn't take some of those situations on myself, hey, Family Life Chaplain or IMFLIC, call the IMFLIC, don't talk to me. If you were that type of chaplain and you haven't developed your counseling skills along the way, I mean, what does that say about you as a senior leader, having an inability to sit down and talk to someone and help guide them through some of their, immediate needs, all right? So, so don't miss out on this opportunity. It does go in your military record. It shows that you've taken the initiative to develop yourself and to develop that essential core competency as a chaplain, all right? Any other questions before I hand it over? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chaplain Osborne. Chaplain Osborne, our Family Life Chaplain, has also been preparing for you a chaplain resource room. The chaplain resource room is in Fort Chaplain's Memorial Chapel. You go inside the main chapel. It's just to the right near the admin office. It's a room that consists of a library, a lot of resources, information regarding counseling, pastoral counseling, therapy, family life ministry, youth ministry, religious education, resources on world religions. We have sections that are being prepared, put together by our Buddhist chaplain, Chaplain Sukwan, by our Jewish community, lots of books on different religions, which will help you for this next section. Next. Before we get into discussion about the scenarios in the packet, we want to talk a little bit about procedure, okay? As we look at procedure, we're really focusing on Army Regulation 600-20, command policy, and especially those changes that came out this summer. So I encourage you to make a hard copy of those kind of documents, all these documents, keep them on hand, and become very familiar with them so that you can refer to the particulars. The slides that we're going through are further augmented by backup slides in the PowerPoint file that has gone out to you. And I encourage you to print those out as well, because the devil is in the details. We can't what if every situation, but we can give you the big ticket items, and then it's on you, supervisory UMTs, to be the experts, the technical chain. We want you to know that we support you all the way up to the chief's office. Okay, so you can submit requests for information, you can come, you can talk, you can get advisement up the chaplain chain and the religious affairs specialist chain to help you to be successful with this for your command. As we look at the particulars, I want you to be aware that there's an emphasis in this process of you as a subject matter expert. So own that title and become the expert. You want to know these things and have frequent discussion with your legal professionals so that you're on the same sheet of music. There's been some changes that have come down in AR 600-20, and those changes especially have to do with timelines and what level of authority can approve different kinds of requests for accommodation. Those religious accommodation processes are in Appendix P of that regulation. You're encouraged to really know that well, to print it out, to have it with you so that you can never be in the position of, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know, I have to get back with you. But it's not okay to act like you don't know where the references are. You can't point a commander or a staff on where to look. Okay, going back to what Chaplain Schaffner told us about the legal foundations, the RFRA standard, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, is largely unknown to us, even though it's been in law for many years. It focuses on whether the government is infringing upon people's First Amendment constitutional rights by creating a substantial burden on the soldier. So it's no joking matter to infringe upon another American's constitutional rights just because a person feels like somebody's request is a joke or it's different from their beliefs. It's our job to help them through the informal process, the formal process, the confidential process, and the non-confidential process. That's what we're going to look at now. You are the subject matter expert in advising your soldiers and your commanders on the process. However, it is always, first to last, the commander's responsibility. They have the responsibility to shepherd the process, but you are advisor to him about what to do and when, okay? It's also the soldier's responsibility. Remember, in the end, they're the one that's making the request. Don't make requests for people who show no interest or no compelling need. Don't try to round up everybody of some presumed religious group and form a group. The regulation is clear that requests for religious accommodation must arise from the individual. Okay? You're there to advise them, help them out in the process as you're able to. Next. Okay, the procedural authorities are in the next slide, and really emphasis on who is in the position of authority to approve different kinds of requests. Okay? A lot of requests can be solved by a company commander. They can be solved by a company commander informally. The commander can say, yes, I approve you to do this on a temporary basis as long as I'm the commander here. You have the accommodation to do or say this or this. Okay? So there's really two kinds of requests. There's informal or routine requests that a company commander can approve or affirm based upon AR 600-20 and AR 670-1, uniform and appearance. If they're within those bounds, it doesn't have to be formal. They don't even have to do it in writing. It's when it rises to the level that it's got to get to the general, and that mainly has to do with appearance. That's really where the sticking point is when it gets into appearance. So here's the categories. Okay. As we look at routine requests, remember that soldiers are probably not that familiar with these particulars. They often operate on a level of kind of hearsay, something that they heard, something that they want to be true, something maybe the barracks lawyer told them. It's our job to advocate for them and help to clarify what it is that they're asking for. So, informally, in all of these categories, there's the soldier asking for the accommodation from the company commander. That's where they need to ask it first. Okay? That's an informal, verbal. You go into the company commander, ma'am, sir, I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm okay to do this or this, or I just want you to be aware that I'm doing this thing that's allowed. But we don't want commanders and leaders to get surprised or shocked that somebody's doing something that makes them look a little bit different. They're wearing something on their head, or they're going to an activity. Uniformity is such a big thing that it puts soldiers at risk. If they look different, they act different, they talk different, it puts them at risk. And so it behooves the wise UMT to know people, to go to people. If you know that a soldier has changed their faith, or they're of a faith that maybe would cause them to stand out, informally you can go to them. You can refer to your religious preference report. Go to them before they ever come to you. A best practice, meet everybody who claims to be of a faith group that's substantially different from you. Just go to them and say, hey, according to the religious preference report, according to your ID tags, as I understand it, you identify with this group. Tell me what that means to you. Are you getting everything that you need? Please know that I'm here for you, to help advocate for you, to help you understand procedures if you have a need. Okay? Okay, now we're getting into some things that you need to really pay attention to, which is timelines. Timeline is important. Do you know that from the time that a soldier makes, the verbal, informal request of their commander for an accommodation of some sort, the commander has 10 days to respond to them. That is mighty fast in Army time. It's like dog years, you know what I mean? 10 days, I think it's pretty hard to accomplish anything in the Army of any kind within 10 days. And when you add weekends and holidays and things like that, that is lickety-split. 10 days your company commander has to respond to the soldier. So it could be an informal response, like, no problem, Sergeant, I get it, and as long as you're in this unit with me as the commander, I affirm you to do this. But it benefits the soldier if they have something in writing, right? And it benefits the soldier to have a UMT member going to the leadership chain and helping them to understand this soldier has been accommodated, here's what it means. And it benefits you, and it benefits all the religious affairs specialists and chaplains who will follow after you, if you would please keep a record of all the accommodations that you know about in your unit. Please do that. If you've ever come into a job with no continuity file, no awareness of what's going on with your soldiers or their needs, you may know how valuable it is to the soldiers and to the UMT to have a list. Perhaps it is stuck on your wall that lists everybody with an accommodation that should be met by the UMT. Okay, one of the request timeline that you need to be familiar with is that if the commander rejects the request, okay, he has to respond, he or she has to be responding in writing. That is fast. That's a fast turnaround. That's almost faster than almost anything else that you'd have to respond to in a 10-day period. Next. Okay, now we're getting into those types of requests, particularly, again, uniform and grooming standards that have to go to the general officer level. So GCMCA, General Court-Martial Convening Authority, which we informally usually refer to as the CG, or maybe the first general within the chain of command. That is pretty high, and it's going to have to get to that General Court-Martial Convening Authority within 30 days. Wow, that is another fast process. There's a lot to be done within 30 days, including weekends and holidays and your leave and everything else, to help the commander at the company command, battalion command, to get the packet together up through brigade to go up to the general. That's fast. There's a lot of moving pieces in it. And so I encourage you, extract what you need out of the packet, including the backup slides, create your own product of a timeline, a checklist, maybe phase lines, decision points that you can advise your command and staff on how to get this process done. Make an agreement with your legal and with your S1. You may even benefit from creating a kind of drill or a training drill where you simulate that something has happened and work through the process, put together a notional packet, because 30 days is fast to get it up to the general level. All right, now we're getting into what the commanders are expected to assess for. This goes to your question over here, Chaplain. What is the commander responsible to assess for? What is your role in assessing sincerity in the religious basis? So look at these standards. The credibility and demeanor of the applicant. When a soldier is coming to ask for a religious accommodation, like wants to be on a different duty roster so he or she could attend Christmas Eve service, or fast during Ramadan, or go to a series of religious events, do they present it as a joke? That's demeanor, right? Are they snickering? Is it silly? Is this funny? Or is this something that apparently matters enough to them to kind of put their reputation, even their standing, their status at risk? That is a subjective evaluation, right? Demeanor, how does the person carry themselves? Is it an offhand comment? Hey, chaplain, I'd like to be off every Friday because I'd like to, be a Muslim now. I want to go to the Jummah service, and the only Jummah service I could go to is, in Kirkland. It's going to take me a while to get there and a while to get back, and pretty much the whole day of Friday I'll be off every Friday. Okay, that's a pretty significant request, right? Is this a joke? It's important that you assess for the demeanor and help the soldier understand the timeline involved and the significance of making the request. Not to scare them. We don't want a chilling effect or a scary situation, right? We want people to make the requests that matter to their soul, that matter to their ground of ethics and being and spirituality. But we need them to understand that there are timelines and that their request is not confidential. So you can have that initial informal verbal conversation with them. That can be confidential, right? Your initial get together with them, talk is confidential. But when you have a formal interview to prepare the formal memorandum that's going to go in the packet, that is formal and it's not confidential. So let me say that again. Soldiers have the right to talk to you confidentially, and you should always assume that they're talking to you confidentially if there's one-on-one, right? Commanders, NCOs, leaders have the right to also talk to you confidentially. Some commanders and leaders have a personal, moral, or spiritual or religious problem with some of the requests of their soldiers. You can talk with them confidentially. But when it gets into the packet and the formal process, you should let the soldiers know that, okay, now I want to meet with you again. And that's what I'm going to ask you, this list of questions that I've got to ask, and I have to put a memorandum together. And that part is going to be elevated to the general officer level. Next. Okay, so this training we're doing right now is the first, but your commands are encouraged to make this a part of their annual training. And you might consider connecting it with EO training, which is pretty closely associated, right? Chaplain Schaffner said religious liberty is one of those categories of EO, and so you're partners with them. Chaplain?
You go back on the slide. The bottom bullet, can you help me understand what that means?
Okay, the bottom bullet, if a request is not based on a sincere religious belief, let's stop there. There are requests that soldiers have which are not religious in nature. They're philosophical or moral. Okay? The Army cares about people's spiritual well-being, right? Supposed to be paying attention to the conscience of people, bring people along into the Army ethic and Army values, but not every request that soldiers say is religious is religious. It may be philosophical. It's something that they believe, something that is part of their political philosophy or worldview, but it's not religious. So maybe they want to have a beard because they're part of the He-Man testosterone club, and that club says you should be as manly as you can, and only men can have a big fluffy beard, and they're trying to be a manly man, and they want the beard for that, right? That's not religion. That's philosophy or personal moral preference. Maybe what somebody might call a personal aspiration, or it might be associated with a scruple, personal moral scruple, conscience type of a thing. That is not religion. So that's where your expertise and your education to distinguish between a claim that has to do with an act of religion, a practice of a religion, whether it's associated with any known religious tradition or group, or perhaps could be a new religion. But there's a distinction made in the law between matters of conscience and matters of religious affiliation. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, so, but I guess, so the key word there is not sincere, it's religious. In other words, you could almost take the word sincere out of that sentence, and it would mean the same thing.
Yes, we're going to get into that coming up, having to do with the memo that you write and the questions that you ask are not only about sincerity, but also about religious basis. So that's where your expertise comes in. It's not only, is this serious to the person? Is it a long-standing practice? Does it make a big deal to them? Will it hurt them spiritually or morally if they're not able to do this practice? But is there actually a religious basis for it? And so what we're saying is that it's possible that a person could be making a request that's a matter of conscience, but it's not a religious request, or it's a religious request, but it's not, it doesn't appear to be sincere, and that's just your assessment.
Yeah, and I think this could be, it's hard to think of how this would pop up, but I guess atheists or humanists might fit into these categories.
For sure.
But my last question here is, do you or anyone else know, is this in the AR? Like that last bullet, do you know what the reference point for that is? I know you got these slides from OJ, right?
Yeah, this is coming from the AR 600-20, where a request is not sincerely held or religious, but I need to get back with you about.
I'm curious if it's in the AR or not.
Yeah, and I also just encourage you with Chaplain Lothian to know that he has a background with Army ethics and working with these issues, matters of conscience and ethics and professional ethics, and he's a resource to us. But we're going to move on. Okay, glide path. We're told that part of being a subject matter expert is to understand the glide path of how these things go down. So, starting at the top, soldier makes a request to the immediate commander. They really should make that request to the commander, straight up, open door, policy first, verbal. It's okay. All right, before getting you into it or all kinds of formality, because a lot of this can be solved at the company commander first sergeant level. But if it's a request that requires a general officer approval letter, then the commander is going to notify all of these persons that you see there. Okay, that's a lot of formality now. Now we're getting a lot of people involved in this and starting to get formal with tracked actions. And then look at number 3. The soldier then submits the religious accommodation request in the proper format. Recommend letters of reference from religious leaders or supporting documents. Recommend, right? Process doesn't depend on a letter from the imam or the pastor or the priest or the priestess. They're just supporting documents. It can make it stronger, but I encourage you, just like I encourage you with the process of conscientious objection or hardship moves or discharge, that you be one of the last people that comments. You do not want to write your letter and then what the imam puts in there or the religious leader is way off from what you're talking about, right? Let you be one of the later ones in the formal process to get the letter of sincerity and religious basis. Okay, let's move down to number 7. All right, the packet is going to be elevated to the general officer level, and the command has approximately 3 weeks to send the packet then to the general. Okay, we're moving fast. And after it's received by the general authority, the general is going to have 30 days to approve and respond to the requester. If the general disapproves, then it's going to be elevated to the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army, G1. This is moving very fast. And part of this process is the senior chaplain, which this post is Chaplain Del Tufo. Chaplain Del Tufo, or the senior chaplain who's on the ground, who's in that area where this is going down. The senior chaplain can appoint any chaplain that he or she determines to do the formal interview and the formal letter. So you as the unit chaplain, battalion chaplain, brigade chaplain, you might have this informal process, meeting with the soldier, gathering some information, getting the facts together, doing your research on their religion, right? But the senior chaplain may say, I really appreciate what you are doing and what you have done, but I want Chaplain so-and-so from this other unit to do the formal interview and the formal memorandum. That's kind of different from processes in years past. This puts a much higher level of scrutiny on the process and enables the senior chaplain to make sure that we are doing this in the right way and that there's no favoritism or there's no pressure on the unit chaplain to do the formal interview and the formal memorandum unless the senior chaplain determines that that's in the interest of the soldier and the army. Moving on. Okay, tabs. You can read that for yourself. Look at tab C, the legal review. All right. So obviously this is a slide that's given in a training packet for us and for your commands. But again, you might need to work with your adjutant, with the S1, with the legal, with the XO about how are you going to track this process within your unit. Okay, it may or may not be a copy of this slide. It might be a checklist that you put together with them. Next. Okay, I don't know how well you can read this, but if you look down towards the bottom, if the request is, does everybody see that? One or more of the following. That's where you get into AR 670-1, uniform and grooming standards, requests that have to go up above the level of the company commander, battalion commander, brigade commander. It's got to get up to the general officer level. And when we talk scenarios, we'll talk about finer points as well of certain kinds of details that could kick it up to an even higher level, to the highest level of the Army. For example, we talked about Sikhs and how Sikhs are kind of a known entity. We've known about them for a long time in the Army. There have been a lot of accommodations for them. Could be pretty long hair under that turban. It can be easily approved, but what if it's long hair that's not under the turban, but it's for a religious reason? That's going way up to the Chief of Staff of the Army level, G1. Next. Pay attention to those timelines again, down towards the bottom. You see the specifics. Next. Next. Okay. Your role. Bullet 2. Chaplains and religious affairs specialists offer confidential advice to soldiers and commanders. There's that confidentiality piece. My mom always said, polite people don't talk religion or politics at the dinner table. When you get into these religious accommodation requests and talking about religions that a commander or a first sergeant are not familiar with, they can have some very strong reactions. You can assure them that you are a confidential advisor for their thoughts, their feelings, their strong positions about this kind of thing, that you might have to bleed off some of that energy and that passion that they have from their personal faith or their beliefs that are separate from their duty as a senior NCO or an officer or a commander to sort this out on behalf of the soldier in support of the Constitution they raise their hand to support, right? So they're looking to you to get smart on these religions. And I encourage you to take your time, what time that you have, to consult as many people up your technical chain and SMEs in your area as possible. There's information that has already been gained by chaplains and religious affairs specialists across the Army. And if you just ask us up through your technical chain, we might be able to get a packet, a completed packet, an approved accommodation request, or some kind of reference in writing that could greatly help you. Okay? Don't fall into the trap into talking to your brother or your sister back in Minnesota who has opinions about what is Buddhism and that something is Buddhist or not Buddhist because of their personal experience. Anecdotal evidence is not important. What's important is an accurate, informed, probably an academic perspective that is broad. And so you want to consult somebody. If it's Buddhism, we've got a Buddhist chaplain here. There are other resources in our area. Obviously, religions that are based on Western beliefs, monotheistic groups are more well known, pretty easy. But you got to be careful that you don't get into putting down people's beliefs or their practices or thinking that it's not part of a religious group when it very well may be. Different splinter groups can have wildly different practices. And what's important is not whether you think this request is Christian or Buddhist or Jewish or heathen or pagan or Wiccan. It's what the group that they're affiliated with claims as their standard practice. And so that's where something in writing from a 501c IRS approved group, a group that is established, they have a tax exempt status. Maybe they've got an endorser, maybe they've got a graduate school or a undergraduate school or books that are published. All of those things can really help us to root our assessment of the sincerity and the religious basis in some objective standard. Next. Next. Okay. Confidentiality does not apply to the formal religious accommodation interview. We are encouraged with our command, perhaps with your legal, to construct some form of informed consent. Informed consent can be as simple as something that you write out before you do the formal interview with the soldier to say, okay, now we've talked private and informally about this a lot, but now we're going to do this formal memorandum. I have to get it right. I have to ask you these questions, and your response to what I'm going to ask you is now going to be going up through the formal process. And would you consider writing, your answers out, letting me write them out right here in front of you so that before you leave, I've got it straight and I have your approval in writing to send your responses to my questions up. Give the soldier a chance to understand the nature of what's going to happen next. Next. Okay, the interview can be in person or it can be by telephone, but we want to be in person if we can. We want to try to avoid the Zoom, avoid the masks, avoid all of those kind of ways because you want to make sure that you got the information straight, okay? If you look at the bottom part there that's highlighted, the Office of the Chief of Chaplain recommends that chaplains other than the requester's unit chaplain provide the formal chaplain interview. That goes back to the senior chaplain appointing that person, and so that point right there is something that you need to talk through your staff with before this type of situation ever comes up, because they could be very offended. Right? Why isn't my battalion chaplain, my brigade chaplain, my division chaplain being the one who's going to write the formal letter that's coming up from my unit to the general? But that's how it is, and it's that way so that the senior chaplain can make sure that there's a fair situation, there's no bias, and there's no pressure on the unit chaplain. So it may or may not be you who does the formal interview and the formal memo. However, you may still feed information into the chaplain who does that. Next. We're encouraged in this process not to see ourselves as just a letter writer or a fact gatherer, but a caregiver to the soldier, right? Support them. What if their request is rejected? Could have an impact on them, right? Could have an impact on their family. When a soldier comes to you for this kind of request, even if it turns out to be unsupported or apparently not sincere, it's an indicator to you that there's a person who's looking for some support, personal support. Next. Okay, remembering that soldiers have an appeal process. The appeal process is in the packet and the backup slides. If the commander rejects their request, they got to do it in writing. The soldier's going to have the right to appeal that decision all the way up to the Chief of Staff of the Army. Next. Here's an example memo. In the chaplain resource room, we're going to put together some binders clearly marked on religious accommodation. So all these documents are there. And let us as a team, as we experience this process, collect packets, put them in the resource room in the binder so that all of us and the people who follow us would save some time, right? They could maybe see a packet, get some ideas of how to word things, and maybe save you an enormous amount of time if you're processing a request for a similar group. Next. Okay, Chaplain Lothian, this is where we get into beliefs that are not directly associated to a known faith. Must be carefully examined to determine if the belief is based on an individual, personal, philosophical conviction or preference. Down in the bottom, the soldier's memo should clearly explain the religious nature and need of their request. In my experience with these requests, a lot of soldiers don't speak well for themselves. The way that they talk about their request and their needs is not very clear. It's kind of jumbled up. It's not rooted in some objective or academic facts. That's where you can be of a great assistance to the soldier to help them phrase things. You're not putting words in their mouth, but you're helping to maybe shine up their grammar, maybe shine up the words or the references or the spelling so they don't look bad as they go up through this process, right? Regarding their dignity, and we're helping them to make a proper request that has a better shot at being taken seriously. Next. We're going to end here, which is probably the most significant part that can help you and help your soldier. As I read through this, studied it, thought about it, and prayed about it, I thought, you know what, I think that the UMTs would do well to print out this slide and make it easily available to your soldiers so that they can process their thinking themselves, okay? Because these are the questions, some of them, that a chaplain would be asking them in the formal interview. Why don't you give this to them in the informal process so they would understand? This is the kind of things that you're going to be asked. This is what you should think about. Maybe even before you go to the commander, just verbally, informally, consider this. You might be looking for this, okay? We're going to move on now to our scenario training with this in hand. And again, a lot of these forms are provided to you in the discussion groups.
The fun part of the exercise, the practical application of what you just was taught and briefed. And so the key to this, though, is this is just going to be a walkthrough, but you're going to go back to your units, and you're going to be able to do this yourself. No matter if you're a first-term, senior, religious affairs specialist, or NCO, you guys are going to be able to look and know what you got to do, build your own packet so you can do the issues that are going to come up with religious accommodations. All right, so the first one, and what we're going to do, guys, is you're going to have 10 minutes, and I would like to ask the senior chaplains you've got the master key. First thing is everybody's going to read it. You guys can start reading your scenario there. It's scenario 2, Jewish. And then you're going to have a minute to do that, and then senior chaplains, what I'd like you to do is facilitate the discussion. That's what this is about. You could pass around the materials to your group, and then I'm going to call on some folks around the room to answer the questions. Everybody clear? All right, so let's go ahead and begin. Read your scenario, and you guys have 10 minutes. Okay, just a quick note of instruction too. Everybody should have just read it. What I'm going to do when I call on you is be prepared to answer these questions. What I want you to do is identify the top 2 or 3 issues, what the chaplain or the religious affairs specialist, NCO, need to do that day or in the days to come related to the issue. I'd like you to come up with at least 1 or 2 RFIs that you would ask your senior chaplain. And then also what policies and regulations you've identified as key for your advisement to your command. And so You've also got what's the command response, the chaplain response, and what is the approving authority. And you've got all the materials you need. So go. Wrapping it up.
Yeah, 1920 by 1080.
And we'll go ahead and take a look at this scenario, and then I'll be calling upon some folks to give some answers that they found as a part of the group. Okay, guys, that's it. Ceasefire. So let's take a look at this scenario. And what we're going to do is I'll call on a few of you. And you got to remember, we're also not just looking at the actions of the chaplain, but also the actions of the command, and also what policies or regulations did you identify that are the key to advising your command on this issue. So before we do that, though, let's ask this question. So as you're looking at this scenario, what is the main issue that you see here? What are some of the problems with this situation? I'll call on this group back here. Yep, what I want to know is what are the main key issues that you identify here having to do with perhaps the soldier or his NCO? Roger, Jewish.
One of the main things that we saw, one of the main things that we saw was that the soldier didn't necessarily, it was already covered with the hat, and so it wasn't really something that was even noticeable. So even if we didn't know what AR 670-1 said at the moment, we could even say, as an advisor, say, hey, NCO, right now it's not even noticeable. Why don't we let him, because we want the unit to have good morale. We want to show that we have good faith towards their belief. For now, maybe let them hold on to it. I'll go back to the office and check real quick, and then I'll get back to you. And then we'd be able to come back with what AR 670-1 already said, and we'd actually be functioning as a religious advisor.
Okay, that's great. Perfect. Okay, what about the chaplain's responsibilities with the command? What are the steps the chaplain would take? Because is it the chaplain's job to approve this? Is it the chaplain's job to, say, hey, you're good? Whose responsibility is that? The command, correct. It's the command. And we got to remember that at all times. The command, we're advisors, we're the SMEs, we're the shepherds of the process. But at the end of the day, it's the command's action. So what about when the NCO told him to remove it until he had signed documentation allowing the soldier to wear the uniform? Was that NCO correct? No, NCO wasn't. So what we have here is we got a situation where we need to provide information, and it's going to be on the UMT, your responsibility to do the research. Now, everybody looked at AR 670-1, and that is your key regulation right there. But let's get to the question here. Who's the approval authority, and what's the process for this issue?
Too small SD card?
Because you just said it's in accordance with AR 670-1. It can be concealed. Did you guys all read that? The yarmulke can be concealed underneath regular military headgear. So, does this situation warrant a religious accommodation request? It doesn't. Who said no? And why? Why'd you say no? Bingo, because it's already covered in AR 670-1. Yeah, over here.
Provided that this particular one is in accordance. No special words, no colors.
Yep, Roger, you guys got that, right? So the key with that is it can be concealed. So this, if you guys look at you guys have a packet, and you guys should all go back after this and print out the materials that you just got briefed on, because it talks about the different types of requests. And this request would be known as a routine request, okay? Because it is permitted in accordance with AR 670-1. The soldier can wear the yarmulke under the headgear. However, the chaplain's responsibility is also to the command. So what is the chaplain going to advise the command? You're going to go with regulation, and that's your job. You're going to go and do that. We're the advisors. And so This is a routine. It does not warrant a religious accommodation, a waiver, or anything like that. So the chaplain's job is to inform his command or her command, as well as then inform the soldier. Because the soldiers are like this. They say, well, you know, pretty sure I'm allowed to do it, like other folks are out there doing it. And they could be in the right or they could be in the wrong. And so that's where the mission of the UMT plays a critical role. Okay, any other issues or steps? I think we covered it pretty well. Anybody got Shopner?
Yeah, just the idea that the chaplain in the RAS may be falling down on their education job. The NCO should have already known this. If the chaplain and chaplain assistant were doing a good job of educating the folks in their community. So no LPD on this type of thing could help out this community.
Absolutely. Roger that. That's good. Thanks, sir. Okay, guys. Well, for the sake of time, we're going to move on. We're going to skip over scenario 4 there, the Pentecostal holiness, and we're going to go to this one, scenario 7, which is the uncut beard turban Norse pagan. Now, let me give you guys, go ahead and read through it while I'm up here jabbering away. How many of you guys have already seen this kind of request? Yep. How many first-term chaplains or religious affairs specialists or NCOs have already seen this request? Yep, roger that. This is a big one. It's getting more popular. So there's going to be some issues with it. So let's take a look at that, guys. Go ahead and read through it, and then we'll call on you to answer the questions. Okay, green light, go. All right, guys, I wish we had more time. You know, this would be great if we could just have more of a discussion. But this is what it's all about. It's about a team, you guys working together. You've got juniors, you've got seniors. The juniors are going to have RFIs for their senior chaplains or NCOs. But it's on everyone, whether you're a first term or an old guy or gal, to know the answers. And if you don't know them when your commander asks you or your sergeant or whoever the soldier is, you know where to go. That's the key. Roger? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, I was in the infantry for a long, long time. Actually, I joined the Army in 1988, back when we used to carry actual muskets and stuff. It was pretty cool. Yep. But here's the deal. I was a chaplain at Fort Benning, Georgia, Sand Hill Infantry OSIT, my first assignment. There I was. And I wasn't even there. I had drill sergeants. I was out there, you know, for infantry basic. I actually was the pastor of the same chapel I attended as a private, so that was pretty cool. I wasn't even in the unit, brand new chaplain. I wasn't even in the unit one day when my drill sergeants came up to me and they played a gotcha game with me. They said, hey, chap, hey, we've got all these pagans, and they want to have a service. What are you going to do about it? Like, they were throwing that one at me. And I was like, whoa, wait, yeah. And I found out that we didn't have anything for our basic trainees there on Sand Hill for our pagans. And my drill sergeants were all just waiting in expectation, like, hey, what are you going to do, chap? So first thing I did, got a hold of my supervisory chaplain. Hey, sir, need some help here. Help me out. And then I went through and found out that, you know, we had to do it. Now, it wasn't a waiver or anything like that, but I provided a service and a time and a space because that was a part of their religious freedoms. And so it was a great ministry opportunity as well. So being in the infantry too, or maybe just other units, how many of you have heard, hey, you know, if I die, I'll see you in Valhalla? You heard that one? What's Valhalla? Heaven for the Norse, right? Basically. And it's kind of cool. They're all into it. You see it on shirts and, you know, the whole Thor thing like we heard about. And so taking a look at this soldier is not a Sikh, Norse pagan. What are some issues here with the chaplain and the chaplain's approach to this? Let's call on this group back here. What issues do you identify there with the chaplain's approach?
Well, we aren't really sure if the soldiers is sincere in his religious belief, and he just wants to grow a beard. And chaplain just he's a nice guy. We just want to help and find different ways to accommodate the soldier.
without really knowing about the religious accommodation. Is this, you know, valid for
Right.
religious accommodation?
So is it a valid request?
Right.
And we got a nice person chaplain here, so what's the issue with that? You got nice person chaplain versus professional officer, chaplain, religious leader, advisor. Doing the right thing, getting the right answer. Not just because you're a nice person, I want to help somebody out. So what's the other issue with how the chaplain submitted the memo? How about this group over here? Go ahead.
Sir, the chaplain should know better to seek requirements for religious authenticity and blend those with Norse pagan. So he's taken AR 670-1 with wearing having a beard and a turban, and he's taking that for Sikh identity and applying it to a Norse pagan, which is a huge no-no for both. So
Roger.
there's a specific accommodation for that Norse pagan that needs to go up through the chain.
Right, exactly. Did everybody else identify that? Right here, Chapman Taylor.
Okay, sir. So, you know, if the soldier is really sincere about this, I mean, I don't see why a chaplain can't say, hey, look, this is what the soldier's requesting. I believe he is sincere. I mean, that's my part in this. I'm going to send it up, and line 4 or whatever, paragraph 4, you know, whether or not you recommend approval or not, that's up to you as a chaplain. But it's going to have to go really high. Because it's against Army policy, and so you better be prepared for that to be before the Secretary of the Army.
Okay, wow, you nailed it. All right, he just kind of gave all the rest of the answers there. Good job, Chapman Taylor. Give him a hand. He touched on the highlights. So here's the deal with this, okay? So yes, he incorrectly what's your name, chap? Winbolt. Yeah, he incorrectly identified the soldier with the turban issue. So what we're looking at here is uncut hair without a turban. That's the key issue here. So this chaplain probably didn't look up Army policy, right? Maybe he went to an old reg. This reg that you guys have before you is AR 600-20, dated 24 July 2020. Okay? So perhaps the chaplain went to an old regulation or an ALARACT or something else. So the new AR 600-20, 24 July 2020 is it. It supersedes everything else. So another point came up. Sometimes you hear all this, and Chaplain Schaffner and I talked about it. For a chaplain, sometimes, or they're getting this request. It's a popular thing. If you go into the situation, this soldier comes in, and you've got a predisposition like, oh hey, they just want to have a beard, they just want to have long hair, they just want to be special. That kind of thing. If you're going into it like that, with that idea already in your head, you're not going to be taking it seriously. And I've actually seen that with some of my junior chaplains who came to me as a supervisory chaplain going, hey, I don't think it's legit. I think he just wants or she just wants to have whatever, well, he with the beard, long hair and a beard. So if you're starting out from that position, you're already wrong. Okay, so we got to move along. Who's the approving authority for this? And Chapman Taylor just kind of touched on this a little bit. Because this is a big one. He said it's going to go all the way up. And why is it going to go all the way up? To the Secretary of the Army. He already said it, but let's hear it again. Exactly. Waiver of Army policy. Because it's not covered by 670-1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you guys. We don't have time to really go through all of it, but in AR 600-20, Appendix P, Table Papa 1, there's an entire process for the uniform and grooming requests and all waiver requests. So here's the deal. If it was just a beard under 2 inches with a turban, okay, it could just go to the general officer. But because it's outside of AR 670-1 and Army policy, uncut hair without a turban, it's going to be elevated all the way up to the Secretary of the Army. And if you don't know that going in, this thing could get lost in the sauce, right? So you need to know who that approving authority is.
Can his request be split? Say if he said, I'm willing to grow it within 2 inches, because he can get the 2 separate requests, right? One
Good question. I've got my SME here, Chapman Grossrock. He's nodding his head. Okay. Yep.
Two separate issues. Right. He's got to comply. He has to comply until it's given that approval from the approval authority.
But I, as a chaplain, could say, if you're willing to, you can do two separate requests, one for the year, if you're willing to do it.
Okay, all right, we got to kind of wrap it up. Is there anybody else on this particular issue that's got something that you saw that hasn't already been discussed or put out there? Yeah.
Sir, I do have just a question about how we as unit chaplains track the progress of these things. When it goes up to GCMTA, of course, I mean, it sounds like a mine and, all the Secretary of the Army. But we just have not, I have not had a lot of success with how it's been progressing up the chain and then going back down after submitting a few and really only having gotten one back. What are your recommendations for, because it is through the command channel, but we are shepherding the process and we need to be tracking it. So how do you suggest we do that?
Great question. I might defer here on that one, Chapman Grossrock.
The packet suggests that at different points, you can develop something within your command. So you could work with your XO, with your S1, with your legal to develop a SOP within your battalion or your brigade, a checklist, a process so that you could track that with them.
I think, sir, what I mean is once it gets beyond the battalion and say it's just sitting at brigade, I mean, is that something where we as chaplains need to say, hey, sir, as brigade chaplain, what's the progress on this? Hey, sir, at brigade, can you check in on division? How does that work? Because that's really the struggle is it's multiple echelons. I mean, of course we could create trackers in our battalion. I mean, that's easy for us, but it's beyond us, sir, that I think.
It is because this shows that the brigade chaplain should be in the process. If it's going to the general, the brigade supervisory group level, major level chaplain should be consulted early and often so that it's a coordinated process.
You have two chains. You have two command chains, right? Technical chain of command, regular chain of command. This is a command function. I would encourage you not to get too involved in the command function, because here in the Army, what happens? If you do a good job, you get another job, and it's not your job to shepherd this. When you said that, I know that's a nice chaplain-y term, but this is not your job to shepherd this through. So my only concern would be don't let the command begin to say, oh, well, this is a chaplain function. Let the chaplain take care of that. Let him shepherd this through the process. That's not your responsibility. Once you've turned in your memo, once you've made your advisement, then your role ought. If you want to call your brigade chaplain, technical chain, and say, I have not heard anything on this, and I am concerned because it's getting close to the deadline, that's great. Help your brigade chaplain out. But I would be leery, and I would encourage you not to be calling, the G1, at either at brigade or up at division and saying, hey, have you... Hey, have you seen this packet? I'm concerned. It's not doing very, that's not your role. So, play your role. Let other people play their role. Give advice. That is advice though, right? If you're 3 days from busting the timeline, can I advise my commander? Hey, sir, just want to let you know.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Thank you, Siri.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was so planned. Back here, a question.
I don't know if that's all the cases everywhere, but I had a good relationship with my JAG officer. I was, for 1 year, departing chaplain at 101st, and so he gave me updates where the packet was, because he's the one that put all the packet together, read everything, asked me for different things, and then that was pushed to the division JAG office. So he told me, hey, it's here, it's there, it's over there. And then eventually it was So having a good relationship with JAG officers helps.
Okay, good TTP. One final thing, guys. I absolutely encourage you very strongly to print out. You guys, if you didn't get it through email, please get with your senior chaplains. They have the packet, okay, all this material. I also encourage you to dig into AR 670-1 and specifically pull out everything that has to do with religious accommodation, grooming standards, etc., and then the latest and greatest AR 600-20, okay? So you do that, you got that packet, you're right there. You might not have all the answers, but you're going to have everything you need to advise your command, okay? And again, use your technical chain. And just the final thing, for Chaplain Taylor and everybody else, AR 600-20 Appendix P, there's a table in there that lists every step, all the way from the requester through the chaplain, intermediate commander, all the way up to general officer level, and then Secretary of the Army if it's elevated, okay? So that's just for your essay to know, hey, where's this thing going?